big and strong is a symbol of our faith in thee. Wonkin, tonkin, wonkin, ne pei chin, tonde nia pai wo. Liahona, Liahona. Our speaks from the dust. Precious truths were restored to the people of this day. Liahona, Liahona, Liahona. Laid long shadows among the trees, and a breeze whispered promises of great things to come. I moved among the trees, and then out into a clearing, to the edge of the shining stream that ran down from the hill, across the meadow, and was lost again in the trees. At the edge of the stream, I stopped and stooped down to look into the still water. The face staring back at me was that of an Indian girl, skin darkly smooth, and eyes so blue they almost seemed black in the shadowy reflection. This is the day of my womanhood, I thought. The 18th year of my life begins today. I am no longer a child, but a woman. And then I thought of what lay ahead. In a few minutes, the sleeping village behind me would begin the toil of the new day. And then I must go to the tent of my grandmother, where she would tell me many things concerning the new responsibilities of my womanhood. Then, for a minute forgetting grandmother and the thought of the new responsibilities, I slipped off the long narrow dress and stepped into the icy clear water, carefully holding my hair as it had been washed the day before in honor of the day's events. Then I spent a long moment wondering if grandmother had ever been young, had ever felt her blood race tingling through her body at the embrace of clean, cool water. The face of the old woman was lined and leathery, and looked eternally old. I tried to think of her legs. I had never seen the old woman in anything but a long robe, walking supported by two of the old men of the tribe, or sitting staring straight ahead. I wondered if she had ever run in the morning sunlight, or sat breathlessly watching the sunrise spread across the gray sky. Finally, I decided that grandmother must have always been old, always concerned with dull, obscure problems. Then I climbed out of the water and stood for a moment to let the water run off my body before slipping the dress on again. I smoothed my hair and looked again into the still pool. I looked no different, but I would try to look more like the woman I had become. Then, going by the village, I saw the smoke curling up now from the teepees, and hear a voice called out, and a baby cried, and a dog barked. It was a day, my day, and I felt a sudden longing to retreat back to my childhood, to run away into the woods to hunt for berries with the other children, or climb trees as I had once done. But still, the thought of my grandmother came back. She was the oldest person in the tribe, stern, unlaughing, with penetrating sharp eyes that seemed to look into all the secret places of the mind. She was held in high respect, even by the men of the tribe, and the chief often consulted with her when any important decision was to be made. When I reached the teepee, the morning meal was over, and my 3 older brothers had gone hunting with father. Mother combed my hair. When she was finished, and I was ready to go to grandmother's, she laid her cheek against mine and said, "Peace go with you, my daughter, and courage as you become a woman. Your father's mother awaits you. Go to her, and she will tell you of your heritage." I stayed a long moment, then turned and walked across the open space between the teepees. No one spoke to me directly, and no one would, from the time I left home until I stood before my grandmother. And when I walked back across the village, I would be different. My mind would be filled with new thoughts, and my heart open to new feelings. Almost numbly I walked, my heart pounding in my chest, my eyes staring straight ahead. I was an Indian maiden, daughter of a chief, mother perhaps of a future chief. I would face this experience with courage and calmness, even though I was afraid and unsure. As I stepped into the teepee, I felt the softness of thick animal fur beneath my feet, and there was a smell of age and awe. And then I looked to see grandmother, seated on a pile of furs, watching me with those deep-set, all-seeing eyes. "Welcome, my granddaughter," she said in a voice surprisingly strong for such a small, withered body. "I have awaited this hour from the day of your birth, Liahona." The name leaped out like a living thing in the darkened room, and I felt a shock in the same instant. Then the grip of my grandmother's hand tightened in mine, and I realized that this was the first time that she had ever touched me. "Sit down, my child," she said as she pulled me close. A feeling came over me as though there were nothing outside this dim space. No sun, no other people, no woods, and no village. Just me and this incredible old woman. Silence hung between us for many moments. In the silence, I listened to the sound echoes of my name and felt that it had never been spoken before. Then, with a start, I saw tears standing in the sharp eyes. Eyes I saw now that were not the shiny jet black of our tribesmen, but deep blue, very much like the eyes that had stared back at me from the still water. My eyes. "I have many words to speak to you today," the old woman said. "I have watched you grow, like a pine tree, straight and tall among our people in this land of our fathers. Your growing has not only been of the body, but of the mind and the spirit. And though you are still very young, you today have become a woman." There was a long pause as she seemed to gather strength from my hand. Pulling her thoughts together, Grandmother continued, "Your name is Liahona." Again, the name sounded between us like a call. "It is my name too," she told me softly. I had had no idea of this, and for the first time, I felt something other than fear for this old woman. I felt almost a part of her, as though the years between us had no meaning, and we had become this day heart to heart. Then Grandmother said, "Since the time of the white God with the beard, there has always been a Liahona among our people. Many, many generations ago, our fathers traveled from a far country, across the big waters, to find peace and a free posterity in the promised land. Guided by the Great Spirit, they crossed the lands and seas until it was made known unto them that they had reached the place they sought. And the Great Spirit, which is God, guided them by means of a law, which he made for them. I cannot answer all things, but I can say that these things took place many generations before the coming of the white God among our people. The law was made not by man, but of God, so that marks could be made upon it by the hand of the God of our fathers, who was and is the great white Spirit. I know not where the ball is now, but its power was lost because our fathers lost faith and turned to wickedness. Many years after the compass was lost, our fathers knew poverty and misfortune as they failed to listen to the voice of the Great Spirit through his servants. There was one, however, who did hear and understand, and because of faith, became a power for good among the people for many years. It was a woman, the first to be named after the compass of ancient times, a woman named Liahona. This first Liahona was born a daughter of Nephi, who was chosen among men to be a servant of God. Her father had talked with God before she was born and was blessed among men. Her father's father had predicted her birth and her destiny to guide many in righteousness. He too had been a man of God, and when this first Liahona, his granddaughter, was born, he gave her a blessing which was to reach into all generations of her daughters. His blessing was this: Liahona, thou art blessed of God. As of old, when the children of God were led through the wilderness by an instrument fashioned in the hand of God, so shall the people of this generation look to thee for inspiration of example. In troubled times, thou shalt be strong to endure. In times of prosperity, thou shalt be humble and keep faith. Thou art a spirit, chosen before thou wast born. You were chosen to stand before men and be a light unto them. And through thee and thy posterity shall each generation of thy people be blessed. Though thy people perish, thy posterity shall be preserved until the last days, when the truth shall return to the Gentiles. Thy name shall be upon thy daughters until this time is fulfilled. In the hush that fell on the dim interior of Grandmother's teepee after these words were uttered, I sat lifted up in the spirit to a reunion with the generations who had previously borne my name. Then Grandmother continued. Often in the days of her youth, this first Liahona heard the sacred words of her blessing, and she came to know the story of the long journey through the wilderness and across the sea. In womanhood, she stood in the presence of the white God and became a strength to the men he had chosen to serve him. She was very fair, even when age was upon her. Her hair was the color of the sun, and her skin was as white as the pale moon, and her eyes were as blue as the deepest places of the sea. Her beauty was not to stir the passions of men, however, but to inspire their spirits. In love and esteem, she was held all the days of her life. In the 15th generation from this first Liahona, wickedness crept among the people of Liahona. And in the 16th generation, the daughter of Liahona fled from among her people to live in the midst of the dark-skinned enemies, where she found a hungering for righteousness among a few, and found love with one. From that time, the daughters of Liahona have been dark-skinned, and have looked to the time of the promise that whiteness will return to their people. But even to the day in which we live, blue eyes have marked the daughters of this promise. Your eyes are blue, granddaughter, as are mine, and we two alone are thus marked among all our tribes. In the 20th generation, the fair-skinned people were destroyed by their enemies because of wickedness, and you and I are remnants of both peoples. When the child of my latter years was the fourth son, I knew that I would carry the weight of years long before I could lay down the burdens of life. When the next three children had sons, I knew that when finally you were born, I knew that I could number the years of my life. And now I am free to go, having kept the faith in telling you of your heritage. Oh no, I said, you can't leave me now. I never knew you before. And now that I do, we must not be separated. I need your help. You call me a woman, but I am young and foolish, and have not the strength to be a light unto anyone, hardly even to myself. Then grandmother softly said, each of us must begin somewhere, and no one else can make the mistakes for you. My mission is complete, and yours is just beginning. Now listen to me, my child. No woman assumes authority in this tribe. This is for men. A woman shines a good example. Unless you are asked, do not attempt to help with decisions. It is at home, with children, with the sick, with the old, and with your husband that a woman's responsibility lies. You will not fail to honor your heritage if you do not seek power outside your own place. Great trials lie in store for you, my child, and I feel the last days are not far off. Great trials and great joys will come. It is a tradition among our people that many lost things will be restored to us, both in writings and in power. It is said that when a fair-skinned people come among us, some of them will bring a message, which is the fullness of the faith of our fathers, and we will know them, for they will say to us, my sister and my brother. More than this, I cannot tell you. Through the day, I stayed with my grandmother, learning the tales of my father. I took the blessing of Liahona into my mind and heart. Then, once again, as long shadows stretched across the village, I walked back to my home. My heart was singing, and I was happy. Happy for hearing, but afraid for the doing. Most of the night, I lay awake, staring into the darkness and remembering the words that I had heard. Toward morning, I thought I heard grandmother call. With speed, I ran back to the big teepee, and with love, I took the withered hand again and smiled into the dark eyes of the shadow of death. And when at last the breathing of the old woman was still, I knew that she had left the tired old body. And I knew that the tears that fell on the lifeless hand were for my own weakness and loneliness. In the morning, I walked again beside the water, and I looked again into the still pool. Age had not marked my face, but with my knowledge, I now looked less carefree and childlike, and more mature and deeply happy. I walked beside the water, toward the trees to the east, and I knew I walked not alone. I went further than I had ever been before, and I came upon a path leading up from the water that I had never before seen. I walked without thinking, and I saw strange wagons wheeled into a sort of circle around the clearing. The wagons were high cover-top ones, like rounded tents. I saw fires and heard voices and watched people moving between the wagons. Most of the people had coverings on their heads against the sun, but here and there were little children running bareheaded. Their hair was as bright in the morning sunlight as the yellow corn. I was so surprised and amazed to see the yellow-haired children that I did not hear footsteps on the dusty path behind me until suddenly I turned to flee, and there stood a tall young man. He was taller than even my father, but his language was not known to me. I tried to speak, but no words came. Then, seeking to move around him, I drank.